Welcome to the third installment in our writing series, which is chunking and extended response. So, people ask, what is chunking? Chunking is just like we do in reading, where we can chunk the reading into separate paragraphs so that students can hone in on the content or the strategy, reading strategy that they're using for each part of that reading piece. You can do the same thing with writing. And with writing, there are a couple levels, but one area might be where you chunk a paragraph into its sentence parts. That might include topic sentence, commentary, um, concrete details. So basically, that's out of order, but a topic sentence, and then you need your evidence, and then you do your elaboration. And so you really get a chance to teach the kids about what it is, why we do that, and what the impact of that writing has on the reader. Another way that chunking is used might be for an entire writing piece where we examine uh, the purpose of each paragraph. So that might be an introduction paragraph. What's the purpose? That might be our claims or our support paragraphs. That might be our counterclaim paragraph, something I know students have struggled with in the past, and it might be our conclusion. So we're lucky today that we get the opportunity to go into Stephanie Nasser's class over at Albion, and she's going to show us how she uses chunking with her students, how she and Erica Hall do that. We're going to be in there as her students. Erica's there and Stephanie, and once she's done teaching to us and showing us what it looks like, what she does with her students, then we're going to have a few minutes to go ahead and ask her some questions about how it works with her students, any obstacles she's encountered, things like that. So enjoy today's bite-sized PD on chunking and extended response.
Good afternoon. I'm going to show you how we set up essays here at Albion. So we start by setting up our board and we put the prompt down. Today we're going to look through the book thief and we're going to say which character is the biggest misfit in the book. We set it up by giving them a sentence frames and a structure for the introduction. We move on to a chart that they build so they have the information for all their body paragraphs for the essay, and that way they can pull examples, they can pull commentary, they can pull more elaboration descriptions. And then because we're going to do this one like an argument, we go ahead and give them the structure of the counterclaim rebuttal paragraph. And last but not least, we go ahead and give them the structure for the conclusion. So I'm going to do a crash on Book Thief with this essay with my adult students behind the filming, just so you can see how it works. Okay, so here we go. So your prompt today is, who is the misfit from Book Thief? The first thing you're going to want to do is we're going to want to define what a misfit is. So can you tell me what you think a misfit is? Anybody? Oh, Leslie, your hand's up. Go ahead.
Someone who doesn't fit in.
Okay, so does not fit in. Erica?
A person who is kind of an outcast.
Okay, an outcast from from what?
Outcast of society's norms.
Outcast of society, and I'll go ahead and put society norms. So we like to put the definitions of what we're after so the kids know where their focus is. So coming back to the introduction, the first sentence, they would define the word misfit, and they would give us then a 3-sentence plot summary of what's happening so far in the book that may go to the character that they're talking about, or an overall just summary plot leading into their thesis statement. Before we do that, though, we want to come over here and start by building a chart on the 3 characters that we're allowing them to use for the misfit essay. Death being our narrator, he's also a character in our book. Ilsa Herman happens to be the mayor's wife, who ends up having an exceptionally strong relationship with Liesel, and of course Rudy, her best friend. So let's just quickly look at what makes a misfit, their qualities, based on these characters. So how would you say that Death is a misfit? Scott?
Well, Death is an outsider.
Why?
Because he's, or she,
He
is observing everything that's going on, and he's our omniscient narrator.
Okay, so he is observing everything that's going on with which character?
Well, he observes everything from all time, but here, Liesel.
Okay, so he's observing Liesel's, I'm going to just put life. And Erica, is he allowed to do that?
Well, he tries not to because it is not what he's meant to do.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not what he's supposed to do. He's not supposed to be looking at Liesel's life. He's supposed to be carrying on the work of carrying souls to the beyond.
But why do you think he watches Liesel's life?
Well, my thought is his biggest misfit quality is his compassion for her. And so I think that ties into him why he does it, is because he has compassion for her and her story, what he sees the way through in those 3 encounters.
Yeah. So let's say we got enough information to do Death here. I would normally switch colors because we're going to a different character, and that way the kids can keep track. Usually at this point the kids will highlight, they'll draw a line. In their comp books, we use comp books for everything, and that way they can keep track as too. So Elsa Herman, what are her misfit qualities?
She's got I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
She has a very large library when they're not supposed to have books.
Yes. So she has a large library of books that are not allowed, yes? Of books that are not allowed. Anything else, Erica?
I think that her guilt makes her, she has such a heavy weight of guilt on her, and I feel like that makes her a misfit of who she's supposed to be, because she's the mayor's wife. And she's supposed to be like the high echelons of society, and yet she lives as though she's this lowly, not worthy person.
Well, and we see that because every time we see her, she's in a house dress. She's in her pajamas.
And her fluffy, unmade hair.
And her unmade hair. So let's say again, we have enough information on Elsa. And last but not least, we would go down to Rudy. And what makes Rudy a misfit? Oh, yes, Leslie.
So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't he sort of like what's going on and he's in his own world? Like, he doesn't even know that he's obsessed with like American soccer and baseball.
So he's obsessed with anything that's not Nazi Germany. He's obsessed with, I'm just going to put down, with anything that's not Nazi Germany. But do you remember, any of you, what his biggest act of being a misfit was?
Jesse Owens.
Yes. So his biggest act was painting himself black, charcoal, using charcoal, to look like Jesse Owens. And of course, Rudy is blonde hair and blue eyes, right? And so he fits into Nazi Germany, but he wants nothing to do with that. And his father then has to explain to him how the blonde hair and blue eyes protects him. So again, let's pretend we have lots of qualities and traits and characteristics. We would then, in knowing that this is an honors essay, because of where we are, we would say, okay, you go in and fill in the examples, your page numbers, because they have it all flagged or highlighted in their own book. If it was a regular essay, we would probably start the sentence out and give them the page numbers. So then this side of the chart would be completely filled as well. We would then come back over here and say, now pick your character, who's going to be our guinea pig, who's going to be our star, and we would have them come here with the claim thesis statement, and they could fill it in. All of our claims always start with a continuing transition. Our kids know what those are. They can come up with them. So Erica, what's an example of a continuing transition? Overall, furthermore, therefore, moreover. Yes, thank you, Scott. Zuzak being our author, yes. We would say, okay, pick a word. And then they would go pick a word, presents the character. You pick a character, Death, and he explains Death through traits, characteristic features of, and like we'll go with what Erica said, compassion. Now, the rule is you always have to have like the title of your book somewhere in your introduction. So usually that would come like either in the first sentence when they're defining misfit, or they can put it into their plot summary, like Martha Zuzak wrote Book Thief, blah, blah, blah. So what's interesting is that we have learned and figured out how to adapt a counterclaim paragraph even if it's a character essay. So in this regard, when they're choosing one character that's the biggest misfit, we would say we want you to set up your second body paragraph as a counterclaim picking a different character. So if Death is our character, what we may do is say, but you know what, Ilsa is a bigger misfit. So that would mean sentence 1, 2, and 3, they would talk about Ilsa and how she is a bigger misfit than Death because she never gets out of the house, because she has such guilt. And then you would spend sentence 4 through 8 reiterating how Death is a misfit, using different examples than the ones you've already used in body paragraph 2. But it's getting these sentence frames down for an argument essay as like rote memorization. So that's why we do it this way. Last but not least, they would have the conclusion. Again, it's only 5 sentences, and they repeat their claim in sentence 1, and then they write 4 sentences for our call to action. And here I just put down is like, how does their misfit try to fit in? So in this regard, if we went back to Death, I would say, Erica, how would you say that Death tries to fit in your conclusion?
Well, he does, not only does, well, he gets distracted by Liesel and the compassion he has, but then he always goes back and tries to keep on a schedule and reminds us as the reader of, you know, his different chores that he has, whether it's sitting on the smokestacks or, you know, just going on to the next person, how he approaches humanity in life.
And there's the part of him that's very like, not Wendy Weiner, but very like, I don't get to take a vacation. I have to vacation through colors. My arms are so sore. Hitler made me work extra hard today. And I didn't even have the strength to carry the adults. So I had to like hold them by a finger so I could hold the children in my other arm. I mean, he has those moments where he is not selfish, but that he does do his fair, like humans, of complaining. So that is a very brief overview how we set up our brainstorms. We do film them every time we do them and put them out for all students to watch. We do average between 80 and 100 views for every brainstorm. This year, I think our kids are very into seeing it again, or especially if they're absent, to get different notes, if especially Ms. Hall students, because they don't have me, so they're getting like double notes, the notes that she does with them, and then they want to come and pull from here as well. And it's been very beneficial to do essays like this. It's old school, we know that's because they're handwriting as you're writing what's on the board, and we do tell them, if we write it on the board, what do you do? They say, I write it down, and they do, they absolutely do. So thank you, thank you.
All right, so we have Erica here, and Stephanie's off camera, and now she's on camera right there. So we just wanted to talk to her. First off, thank you for showing us this process. It's awesome, just the way that it scaffolds so clearly for all of our students. One of the things I saw, I got to come into Stephanie's class a couple weeks ago and watch her do this. It was a pretty big class, 30 some odd students.
36, yeah.
36 students, and every single one that I saw was on task. They were writing down the notes, and when I left at the end of the day, I felt like every student was prepared. Like those guys could have hammered out the piece that you had prepared them for through this. So what are some of the benefits? I'm gonna start with this question and get to the chunking one, but what are some of the benefits you see of using this with your students?
So I think first of all, it's like we trained them to follow this format. And what we find by this time of year, that especially the honor students, they'll get off of the sentence frames because they've learned how to do it, that they want to write their own words, so to speak, you know, especially for the claim and thesis statements. And we use this because then they can literally, it's Jane Schaefer's model is what we're following, is that they have the format down. I used the word rote learning in the video, and I'll use it again here. It just becomes like 2 + 2. They just know it, they don't have to think about it, and they just do it. And so it literally takes us about 6 weeks in the beginning of school to train them to take the notes the exact way that we do. So literally copying the exact format of how these notes are done, and every essay is different depending on the topic of what we write down. And so by the time we get here, we notice a lot of kids will highlight on their own, or they'll change the format because whatever works best for them. But it's just getting that practice under their belt, so to speak.
So, and by getting this practice and having this scaffold, what does it put their kind of cognitive load on?
It puts the cognitive load on the content and how, you know, versus how they're going to write it down. So they're spending more time figuring out what elaboration and commentary is versus what the topic sentence is, because the topic sentence, the example, it just happens, and they don't have to even think about it after a while. But the hardest part for writers is to be able to say why, and our kids still struggle with that for sure, but it's definitely and that's what you want. You want them to be able to put down their thoughts. To take reading and put it on paper is really, really hard, and we take out the guesswork so they can focus on what they want to say.
Right.
Well, and I would say too, when we did, I think it was essay 5 or 6, we're on what, 10?
We're on
9?
10 or 11 right now.
And so our honors classes did an essay in partners. And so with that essay, we set it up and we put it on the board blank, and we said, okay, here's the prompt, here's how you break it down, which they've already done only like 4 or 5 times. And yet with their partner, they were able to fill in everything, and they were able to brainstorm with partners or in small groups. And I thought that was a huge testament to how quickly, you know, kids that are really focusing and trying, you know, to their hand at, you know, putting down their thoughts and ideas, it just helped them so much. They had great essays and ideas in those, and we didn't even have to go through it with them.
And I
at
would
that
say,
point.
like, even though we've only technically wrote 10 essays, they've done enough projects that involve the chunk paragraph that it just comes to them now. Because in essence, we've probably written 20, 25 things.
Oh, yeah.
But we just don't call it essays.
Yeah.
We'll say, write a chunk paragraph for this research assignment, write a chunk paragraph for that research assignment, and they just do it because they just know what to do. So the chunk paragraph is 8 sentences, topic sentence, cited example, elaboration, you might call it commentary, which is fine, cited example, elaboration, concluding sentence.
Plus we have Newsella that we use that for too.
Yeah.
So weeks that we're not writing an essay, we typically have them write in Newsella
A
2
chunk
different one
paragraph
chunks.
from the Newsella
So-
article.
Have you had students come back from high school or college to you to talk about how these scaffolds have helped you?
Yes,
Yes.
but they do come back.
They do.
Intro, like every year we get
Constantly.
constant emails and phone calls. And
And people stopping by, and then I have a
Siblings,
student that is
yeah.
a senior this year, and she is still asking me to look over her essays
Yeah.
and give her feedback and help her write things, and
Yeah.
yeah,
It's awesome.
yeah.
One of the things I saw when I got to be in your class was you chunked the essay for them.
yeah,
Will you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so basically, for this particular essay that I just showed you was the first body paragraph would be, how is death a misfit? Find 2 examples and explain why that makes him a misfit in the book. And so we would literally chunk it, and I would put a number 2 next to an example, and then we would go back to the other part of the list and be like, tell me why, and then you would put 3 and a 4, and then we would go back to the list that's another example, find a different example, and then find 2 different reasons, and that would be a 6 and a 7. So it becomes so easy, and I usually say, who's my guinea pig, like which student wants, and they raise their hands, but then I'm like, okay, everybody else go do that for yourself right now. And it's so fast, it's just innate in their, because we've spent the time training them. I would say we work harder in the beginning of the year by standing in the middle of the, standing in front of them and modeling and going back, back and forth between what we call the cheat sheets, which is the how-tos, right?
Mm-hmm.
To now though, but now we're grading longer essays, so.
Well, and when I've forgotten to put the numbers on the board, they make me go back and put it on the board.
It's like too good training.
Like
want the
just,
numbers.
they want the numbers, they want to know, okay, so I'm using this information to pick my 2 and 5, and this is my 3, 4, 6, 7, and you're like, yes.
And we
okay.
could label that, we could also skip that and just label, okay, this column is always your examples, like I had up here, those are always the examples, so that's sentence 2 and 5. And this other column is always gonna be your commentary. For the counterclaim, they gotta remember those sentence frames, because that is so important, whether it's state testing or any argument essay, to be able to use those frameworks. And so, again, we use the numbers just because it's easy for them to remember. It actually, they'll say to us at the end of the year, because we never know who gets which informative or argument on the RISE. Our students will actually come back and say that even though the argument is 5 paragraphs and the informative is 3, that the argument's easier.
By far.
By far. And yes, you'll be like, well, of course, you can argue one side. No, it's really the counterclaim paragraph that they have so drilled in their heads that it just comes easy to them. And you can cut it down. So in our 6th grade here, they're only doing a 5-sentence chunk is how they're starting, which just is a topic sentence, 1 example, 2 elaboration, and then a concluding sentence. So, and that's also used for our ELL students and our special ed students.
Yeah, so we just call it a modified chunk, so that they know what they're doing.
Okay.
So usually we revise a couple different ways. We revise online, or we print them and revise them on paper and give them back to them, or have them revise, each other's essays. And one of the ways that the revision happens is count how many sentences are in body paragraph 1. So if there's only 7, we'll say, okay,
What's missing?
which sentence is missing, right? And then I'll say, where are there citations, because they should be at the end of sentence 2 and 5. And they're like, oh, it's on sentence 7. Okay, so can you figure out for your writer, if you're editing, what it is? Can you mark it, please? Sentence 1, sentence 2, and maybe we'll use different highlighting colors for them. And they're now at a place where they can edit each other's and do very, very well.
So you talked about a little bit about how it can be modified for all learners. Are there any other ways that you've seen it modified for advanced learners or for students who are struggling with writing?
Well, besides cutting it down, you could also give them sentence frames for every sentence, which we both have worked with our special ed teacher. She's been in both of our classrooms over the years, and that's a lot. That's one way that we've done it, and that she's brought into her resource class. So the kids are only filling in a word versus a phrase, so it's also been done that way, and that way it's much easier for the student. For example, on the board, I put down continuing transition. I wouldn't do that now for an honors class or even a regular class. I'd say, what comes first? And they would be like, transition, what kind? Because we have different kinds, and they now can, call it out. And they're always like, moreover, how about, and it's old school drill and kill. So I think, you know, you can always make it harder. You can always make it easier as long as you have the basics of what that chunk paragraph is supposed to look like. And then you can modify, as you and I have talked about, like Jane Schaefer is very set on this is the way it's supposed to be. But I've taken that and completely revamped it for what we do here at Albion.
Right.
The other thing too is that, and she'll do this, or is it Lauren that takes, so taking the notes and then it's on a paper, because I have some special ed kids that they cannot, even if they attempt to write all the notes, but they can't read it. And so we'll give them a handout which has the notes that they attempted to take, and then our special ed teacher will also give them sometimes a graphic organizer
With
the sentence frame, and then notes are there and there's like extra for them. So they're still typing and working it together, but they're using this help and this help together, and they know how to go about that at this point in the year enough that they can put together.
So we
an
write
essay.
down the brainstorm on paper, and it's in the
Yes.
interventionist room, it's in the Howell room. We keep the copies if a student's absent or they're struggling, they're like, Ms. Nasser, do you have the paper notes? Because they want to see too. It's not getting them out of doing the work initially, it's just another way to help them. This also works very well for nonfiction, it works very well for media, because we do use the same thing when they're taking notes and using for TED Talks or a video or an article, we do the same thing. Right, so we do have our social studies teachers here, usually when they have their FAQs or FRQ questions that they have, they'll say modified chunk or full chunk if they want more information, and they just use the facts as their evidence. Our science teachers in 8th grade use the chunk as well, but it's not evidence, they use their findings, their lab findings. So they just change a couple of words about it, like we say, cited evidence, right? They say, so, you know, your lab facts or however
Your
they
data,
put your data, and it's the same thing, it's the same format, and so the quality of writing, because it's across the board, has gone up a ton.
Yeah, it's not just an English
Yeah, for sure.
assignment anymore. It's all.
And we've tied it back to the close reading skills. We've tied it back to, you know, taking good notes, like reading for purpose, right? And so they go to their comp books or their articles that are highlighted. They go back to that because they know that that's going to produce for them, you know, a decent essay. Your lowest learner can do this.
Yeah.
Your most struggling writer can do this. The kid that says, I've never written an essay in my life, they can do this.
Yeah.
And they want to because they see it. I would say,
Have a Stephanie. Get yourself a Stephanie.
you're so cute, I love you.
No, I would look at videos, I think, of, like, I know you post, and the way I learned was by watching you.
Yeah,
So I think if you can find a teacher to model from, honestly, that's one way.
and to give the kids, honestly, to give them the handout, like like we call it our reference guide, but if you give them a handout of the chunk paragraph, and maybe you leave some of the words out so they can, you know, that's one strategy, right? So they can fill it in as they go. I'm sorry, I'm so old, I don't know what you call that now, but
Skeleton notes.
yes, skeleton notes, but you can take them sentence by sentence, doing it with them and asking for, you know, volunteers. Be like, okay, this works, why? So they get a more complete reference packet that they keep in their notebook, but we go ahead and the most important pages for writing, we copy on beautiful fluorescent green cardstock, and it's laminated, so it sits on everybody's table or desk, and it just has the aspects of writing that come in. So the different types of transition words, whether it's a continuing or it's a conclusion or an example, the dead word list that we never allow, the words that we never allow them to use, the different sentence frames depending on the type of essay, argument, and then of course you have the one chunk and the modified one chunk of what's in every sentence. Basic MLA format. We do start teaching them how to use action action verbs in 8th grade to take out the to be verbs. And that's a struggle, but this is where we are right now, right? Like emphasizing these action verbs. So that's the basics of what this is.
And that's a scaffold that all of your students have all the
Yes,
time.
Yes.
doesn't matter what level they are, gifted and talented, honors, ELL, it doesn't matter. Every
And-
student gets this. I
And
would
they've
use
been
this.
getting it, and they've been getting it since 6th grade. They got one in 7th grade, they got one in 8th grade. And they just build a little bit upon each other as far as what's included and what is looked for each year.
Our kids keep them, like they'll email
Yeah.
us and say, can you resend me this page, or, you know,
Yeah.
can you and we just send it to them. So they like to have